Welcome to Anything Cricket. Let's talk. Well, we're focusing on our women cricketers once again for the better part of this show. We're going to get in some stuff in relation to the men's game as well, with some white ball fixtures coming up, important white ball fixtures too. But first of all, congratulations to the Barbados women, first of all, for doing the double in the recently concluded competition, recently concluded women's competition. And of course, congratulations must go out as well to the Cricket West Indies for organizing the tournament. Though sometimes when you see comments from the cricket followers, you wonder, ladies and gentlemen, how appreciative people are of the efforts of the administrators. Of course, criticism is good because it pressures you to do better. And I'm sure you guys will want to get into that type of thing as we go forward. But let me say, first of all, a warm welcome to Aaliyah Williams, one of those cricketers who we were able to see representing the Barbados team. Aaliyah, welcome to Anything Cricket Let's Talk for the first time.
Hello, good night, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about women's cricket.
And of course, Mali Richards is no stranger to Anything Cricket Let's Talk. Welcome, Mali.
Hi, good evening, Phil. Good evening to Joel and Aaliyah as well, and to all the listeners and viewers wherever they may be. It's a pleasure to be here.
Joel Manning had the best seats in the house for the women's competition, Joel. And after welcoming you, I think I'll let you get the ball rolling in terms of sharing with us your thoughts generally, first of all, on the women's competition.
Hey, good night to yourself and Aaliyah and Mali as well. Also to the viewers and listeners of the program at the moment. Definitely a pleasure to be here tonight. My views on the women's tournament. So I had a chance, obviously, to be there with the Super 50 and the T20 Blaze. And overall, I would have to say that I enjoyed what was on show for the competition. In terms of the prospects for the future, you can certainly say that you can see some shining stars coming through in terms of a lot of the under 19 and the younger players. Quite a few new faces as well across the tournament. And in terms of the experience, you were seeing that there as well. And certainly those experienced campaigners who have already played at the international level put up their hand across both the Super 50 and the T20 Blaze at various stages for their respective sides as well. So overall, I must say that it was a good tournament. And there is a lot to be improved on, but there are certainly good signs for West Indies women's cricket going forward.
Mali, your opening comments regarding the last few weeks and the women taking center stage?
Well, it's good to see actually that we're seeing the development stages now for the women's game as the game's growing around the world. I think the West Indies are probably a little bit behind, but I think better late than never. And to see the T20 and the 50 over happen back to back, it would have given the girls actually an opportunity to play some consistent cricket, something that I think has really been lacking. I can speak from the Leeward Islands perspective, and there's not much, if any, cricket for the girls here in the Leeward Islands. So at least we're seeing, it's almost like the toothing stages, the teething stages of the women's game here in the Caribbean. And let's just hope that as it continues, it just grows and the talent pool expands as well, because obviously, the West Indies women's team needs it, and the more competition, the better.
Well, of course, the beautiful thing is that we've got Aaliyah Williams with us, of course, a member of that team. Aaliyah, what was it like as part of the team? You heard from the guys there who were on the sideline, so to speak. Being part of that whole unit, what was the experience like?
Needs it, and the more.
Yeah, being in the Barbados team is a mixture. When you get on the part, you must be serious, but more than often, we just kids around, we enjoy each other company, we hang out together, we bond. So when we're on the park, it's much easier. The unit is pretty good. A lot of youth and a lot of senior roles going on. The seniors really put up their hand on and off the field. So that makes jobs easier for the juniors and, you know, younger players who probably first or second year within the unit.
Okay, so the feeling of the double crown victory, so to speak. Twice as nice, obviously. You know, the second one probably a bit more challenging without your leading player, Haley Matthews.
Definitely, Haley is a world-class player. That would have been a big hole to fill, but we also still had the experience of Shakira Salmon, which she led pretty well. Yeah, obviously losing a player like Haley Matthews is a big loss, but I think the Barbados team, as I said, filled with a lot of talent, seniors and juniors. So we knew to put our hand, hold our weight, and bring the title home.
Mhm. Okay, so Joel, you did quite a bit of commentary on the competition. Um, I know that you are well trained. We discussed this before in the whole, you know, journalism and broadcasting, things of that nature. But what was it like in terms of doing commentary in the women's game as opposed to the men's game? Was there a difference?
Well, it was my first women's tournament, I must say that. And the only real difference I could say maybe is the pace of the game. And that is definitely no insult to the women that were on show. That's honestly probably the only difference. But in terms of the competitiveness, in terms of the passion that's out there on the field, obviously six is probably just not as big, but you know, that is about it. But no, there's really not that much difference, I would say, between commentating on the women's game and the men's game, just other than the pace of the game. But it's a pace that you get accustomed to, and you kind of the first you would have started off with the Super 50, and in your mind naturally you start to adjust to totally say, okay, you're accustomed to men's games and you think, okay, this is the pace at which, you know, you start, and these are the types of totals that you probably think could be competitive. But it's just a case of very quickly shifting that and kind of adjusting to what was actually on show, and starting to rank the teams versus each other and say, okay, well, actually, it's not a total that naturally you might say might be competitive, but in the women's environment with the teams on display, the surfaces that they're playing on, actually, funny enough, this might turn out to be a very competitive match. And very quickly, just making that adjustment. Yeah. So yeah, just the difference in pace was the only difference. But other than that, honestly, it was a thoroughly enjoyable experience to commentate on the women's game and to get to learn their game as well, because their game is different, honestly, from the men's game as well, and the way they go about it, and the emotions are there as well, the passion is there as well. So yeah, honestly, it was a very enjoyable experience.
Talking about passion, Mali, I know you're very passionate in terms of the men's game. You played, of course, you've got the, what should I say, the pedigree, the genes, all that, and you've played yourself.
Passionate for the game, men's game, women's game, the game in general.
I was getting to that. So what I was saying was that from past interactions with you, I recognize that you seem to be equally passionate when it comes to the women, and knowledgeable as well. So I know you didn't get to maybe watch as much as you wanted to, but to what extent really, what are the serious messages that have come home to you from this tournament?
Well, just mainly the expanding of that talent pool, something that, you know, is desperately needed, not only for the men, but for the women as well. We've seen the first under-19s girls tournament earlier. I think it was late last year as well. So we're just seeing more development of the women's game, and more attention actually being paid. And there's still more attention that needs to be paid, that's for sure. You know, Barbados probably being the standard bearer of the region in terms of the amount of cricket that the girls get to play, and the development as well. And I think a lot of other territories here need to catch up to that. And I think that would only bode well for West Indies cricket as a whole, you know. But in terms of, just to pick up on what Joel was saying, the games that I did see, I would have done quite a bit of women's cricket as well, you know, the international games, West Indies, South Africa, Pakistan, England as well. And I actually really enjoy doing the women's games. As Joel said, the pace of play, the women don't mess about. They get on with it, and you know, the game is over in no time. You know, you don't get players being fined for slow over rates in the women's game. That's for sure. So I enjoy that personally. They get around in the field. They're aggressive. It's no different really from the men's game. And I just would love to do a lot more, actually, and love to see a lot more cricket of women's cricket in the region. Because I just think, even though, as I said, we're in the teething stages, just need to pay a little bit more attention, especially in the early stages. You know, you've got a Haley Matthews, Shakira Selman, as Aaliyah would have said, really experienced players. But, you know, they would have come up probably differently to how a lot of girls are coming up now in the game. And I think that's just affecting the overall quality, especially of the international team. But I know the girls are hard workers, and the more investment that's done in them, they'll definitely see the results.
Well, first of all, let me remind you and our viewers that, well, of course, we won't have to remind the viewers, we're live on Anything Cricket Let's Talk. We welcome comments, and if there's any difficulty in making comments in the actual chat, you can WhatsApp me at 246-851-2109. You can WhatsApp 851-2109, area code 246, of course, for those who are watching outside of Barbados. And we look forward to your comments and questions, and we can share those with the panel, and that may in itself create some discussion or may have some of your queries addressed. Aaliyah, you, as I said, part of the squad, but there are some players, or some people, I should say, some fans, everyone doesn't follow as closely as Mali and Joel, trust me. So tell us a bit about yourself and what you do as a cricketer in the Barbados setup.
Well, I am a seamer, a seam bowler. I usually bat like lower down the order. People will usually say that I'm pretty good in the field, so that's probably one of my strongest points. I hope Joel will agree there. But yeah, I'm a bowler, bat lower down the order, and pretty decent in the field, I should say.
Okay. So as a bowler in the Barbados setup, would you say that the strength in the Barbados team lies more with the bowling, the batting, or is it evenly distributed as far as you're concerned?
That might be a tough one. I would say Barbados, we probably play with a lot of bowlers within the side, so we could make a lot of changes and stuff. But our batting is pretty strong with Kaisia, Kaishana at the top, Leah Allen. So probably I would go towards the batting, but other people would probably think even. I don't know, Joel, would you agree to? I'm with him all the time.
You watched it all. I guess Leah expression. She's got to go back and interact with the batsman and the bowlers in the side. So she's got to be very careful how she answers that question. You don't have that problem, neither does Mali.
I could kind of agree, because for me, I think that Barbados has the experience in both departments, and that's what a lot of teams didn't have. So a lot of teams had experience, let's say, in one department. So you would have experienced bowlers, and they kept things tight, but then the batting didn't necessarily come through with the runs. And then you would have other teams whereby the experience in the batting and they got the runs, but then they gave it away in terms in the ball or in the field. But in terms of Barbados, I think that they had both departments, as Aaliyah was mentioning, and in terms of which might be stronger, I might actually lean towards the batting maybe being slightly stronger, just because of a couple of names that she mentioned in terms of the pair of the Knights, Kaishana and Kaisia. And then you come down, Leah Allen was fantastic with the bat as well. And I think that they spread that experience quite nicely going down towards, almost down towards number 6 in that order, because you still have Shakira Selman coming in when Haley Matthews was playing, she was up there as well, and that kind of lengthened that batting order as well. So I think that I would probably side with maybe the batting being just a tad stronger, but I mean, honestly, it could probably be a 55-45 type of scenario in terms of a team like Barbados, because I think that they also had one of the better bowling units on display as well. Because when I think about the amount of extras that we saw across the tournament, even the fielding aspects, as Aaliyah mentioned, yes, you are up there with some of the better ones in the tournament as well. the extras were not as many for Barbados. They were still there, but not as many as some of the other teams on display in terms of the missed fields and the drop catches. There weren't that many for Barbados either. So if I had to say, I would say maybe a 55 to the batting and a 45 on the bowling, but honestly, it's quite even for them.
Mali, we're going to bring you back in a minute, but it's not often we get to talk to the actual players. And I know, Aaliyah, you followed the discussions on social media and wherever cricket is being discussed, and you'll be well aware of the debate over what I could say is the pool of cricketers, not only at the Barbados perspective. We're going to get to the broader, the broader realm of West Indies cricket. But we started, of course, with the champions and talking about Barbados being the double crown champions. But this issue of the pool, I think it is maybe safe to say that there's probably a bigger problem at the West Indies level, because you are now playing you're playing a higher standard of cricket, and therefore you need more players of a certain quality. And I think it's fair to say that too often it looks as though there's too few people are carrying the brunt of the pressure. So this is what I'm going to put to you, Aaliyah. There's been much talk about how to increase that pool. What do you need to do to get more women playing cricket and to get a higher standard of cricket? So I'm going to start. I know you obviously play, and you would have started at some point in time. So how did you get involved?
That's one of my funny stories, I always say. But I don't know if you know a guy by the name of Alfred Campbell. He introduced me to the cricket.
If you're talking about former Barbados Division 1 player many years ago for YMPC, yes?
Right. So, yeah, I was just about 18 years old. I was into football, and he just stopped me on the road and, invite me to play and stuff. I went a month after. I met Richard Clark and Pamela Levine, and then I just started playing. It was interesting. I met a lot of senior players like Aaliyah Williams. I was pretty close with her, and Shamilia Connell. They taught me a lot. They took me around with them, trained with them, stuff like that. So it was, my experience starting was pretty good, pretty easy. And I think that is what we need for younger players now. We need senior players that would be there and, encouraging the younger players or showing them reasons why they should continue.
So you were 18 years old, so it means you would finish school virtually then, at least secondary school for sure.
Sorry, say again?
You said you were about 18 years old, so I'm assuming you would have completed secondary school by then.
Yeah, I was finished, yeah.
Right, so it means then, and yet you're representing Barbados, and I believe you may have ambitions to go further. So it suggests then that all is not lost, gentlemen, if we don't catch them in primary school and even secondary school.
Yeah, but that's the one thing that actually stood out to me, was that the fact she was 18 and she hadn't played cricket before. Right, and she goes and she's now representing Barbados and looking for higher honors. I think the difference now with the growing of the women's game, especially here in the Caribbean, we're going to have to try and find them a bit earlier than 18 years old. We've got to get the young girls into cricket, as early as the young boys are starting to play as well.
And how are we going to do that, Aaliyah? How do we go about getting younger girls involved in the sport? What are some of the challenges that you think are there or that you've recognized since you've been around?
I think that the younger players, they probably don't understand cricket, the level cricket is at for the women right now. They're not interested. Also, I spoke to a young lady that I met in town while wearing my Barbados kit. And she was like, she wanted to play and stuff. I think she was about 7 years old. And I said, well, cricket is starting around in the schools now, so why you don't go and try out? She told me that the boys don't let her play. So that could be a big challenge as well. We need the boys to be there for the ladies as well and encourage them to play, because women's cricket is pretty big now all over the world. So yeah, probably just that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, and also the interest, not knowing that there's a career for women in cricket.
So how do we get around that? I mean, that's an open question to anybody. How do we get around that, John?
And that's where the education comes in terms of where the administrations can do more. They've got to do more in order to really advertise this as a career for young girls, because as Aaliyah says, a lot of them don't know. We've seen the women's CPL, the women's IPL, the women's Big Bash League. There are opportunities out there now, central contracts for women to make a real career and make good money in playing cricket. And I think young girls in the Caribbean need to know that.
From I guess listening and asking questions in terms of my experience that I had over the tournament, as Mali was mentioning, I think a lot of it goes back to the administration, not just at the level of what we would consider to be the West Indies level, but administrations going down across the region, because there were a couple teams who went into that tournament without any real foundation, and that foundation in terms of the buildup of whether or not that was a camp or whether or not I was actually playing competitive cricket, because you had teams being picked on the basis of just names from previous competitions, or you had girls just grouped together to play in the tournament. And that is where I think a lot of the fundamental issue is. In terms of women's cricket in the Caribbean seems to only be picked back up around women's cricket time, quote unquote, whatever time that is. And there's no real continuity across or the remainder of the months in a year whereby you actually have some form of momentum building up towards another tournament, or some form of momentum building up in terms of the development of players. I actually, funny enough, today was on YouTube and I saw, in terms of Trinidad and Tobago and them having a separate cricket association for women, and the plans that they are attempting to roll out. And I actually do know that Trinidad was one of the teams that actually had a camp leading into the tournament, and a lot of theirs is about the development of their younger players. And you can actually see that because they have quite a few, I think probably about 5 under 19 players are currently on that Trinidad side. So I think that is where a lot of the issue is, whereby women's cricket does not get the attention that it should be getting in terms of the possibility of developing it. And it's just a case of, well, it exists, and we go back to it whenever we need teams, or we go back to it whenever there's a competition, but there's no real push behind it in terms of the infrastructure, the resources, the attention, because attention is a serious thing as well, especially in terms of who should be the persons actually coaching some of these sides as well. Because looking around these structures, I do think that there is a lapse there as well, and a lack there as well, in terms of just treating them as women. And understand, I guess, where I'm about to take this, in the sense that, yes, there's a difference between men and women in terms of what they might need to develop, and the resources that you might have to give them, or the way they are naturally, physically, etc. By the end of it, they're still athletes, and they still need a high level of training, and they still need a lot of the same resources and development that you give towards the men's structures, especially at the regional level. And I think because a lot of that is missing, you're not seeing the highlights or the performances from these girls, that you don't have young girls, looking up and say, yo, I want to do that one day. But you see them, as Aaliyah mentioned, in that Barbados kit, and she wants to wear that Barbados kit someday. And that helps, but a lot of it once again goes back to the fact that I don't think that enough attention is there, enough resources are there, and once again, the manner in which they go about, I guess, dealing with the women, it almost feels as if sometimes they are second fiddle almost to the men's cricket.
Okay, well, we know, and we keep identifying, sometimes it seems more and more problems, but we're still not putting our finger on the solutions. And sometimes I get the impression that the people who have that responsibility don't really know the next step. I say that because, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. Aaliyah seems to know what's going on in the cricket community regarding discussions and so on. And too often I hear comments like, she needs, this she doesn't mean you, Aaliyah. This she is a general she. She needs to play off the back foot. She needs to do this. She needs to do that. She needs to bowl a googly. And I read these comments if I'm in a chat, and I listen to them if it's audio. And I'm kind of puzzled, because you would think sometimes that they're talking about maybe a Narain, or I don't know, a Blackwood or Craig Braffett, or Cornwall or somebody like that, who's been playing cricket from time immemorial, as I said. You're talking about women who have not come up in a culture of cricket all around them. In fact, Aaliyah pointed out something just now. The young lady at 7 years old would love to go and play, but the boys won't let her play. Joel, I'm sure as a youngster want to play cricket, the boys didn't stop you from playing. And likewise, Mali, and certainly I didn't have that problem, you know. And so I'm saying that it was all part of cricket was all around. And even although it's not like maybe before, a guy can still find a cricket game if he wants to go and play some cricket. And there's a lot of what we call in education incidental learning. Women don't have that. So if she needs to play off the front foot, somebody got to show her how to do that. And I find that too much of the comment about our women cricketers, whether it be Barbados level or West Indies level, is too negative. They need to do this and they need to do that. Somebody got to show them, because it's not going to just happen like that, because they don't play enough for it to happen like that.
And I'm not sure what's happening in Barbados in terms of whether there's a women's league per se. I know there's nothing of the sort for the hardball in the Leeward Islands, that's for sure. And I can speak about what, my territory. It's the girls need their own. I don't think it should come down to a 7-year-old being, allowed to play with boys, to be honest, at this stage of the women's game. I think they need their own camps, their own leagues. You need the drives from the administration to try and induce more participation. You need to be creative. We're living in social media times. You need to come up with creative drives to really target the youth of today, or really just get out the way and let the people that want to do it.
Yeah, as you said, look, there are probably more girls in schools than boys, even at least in the Barbados context. And the fact that it is left to girls to go and find a game with boys in school suggests to me that the powers that be, both at the school level and even at the national level, just don't know how to get it started, because it's not a charge to girls. So it means that you simply got to introduce it to them. And this is why I'm happy that Aaliyah, was quite keen to be on the show, because I really think it's odd when you expect men to be pushing women's cricket. I'm not saying that men should not be passionate about it and should not play a role. But if 4 guys turn up in a school, especially a primary school, to do a cricket demonstration, I can assure you that the girls are going to be somewhat intimidated by that. If 4 turn up at a secondary school to do the same thing, the girls may be distracted by that. Okay? So you need to have, I'm not about the girls in the school. So therefore, you need to have women being part of this whole push to get women playing cricket. And that's not happening. How can we get that achieved, Aaliyah? And Mali wants to get back in there as well, but let's hear from you first, Aaliyah. Women to push a sport that's for women.
Yeah, it's kind of tough, but I know a couple of my teammates are actually doing it as well. Our skipper, Shakira Salman, she's started her own academy for young girls and stuff. But yeah, as you said, it would be pretty odd, a couple of guys coming in to promote women's cricket, and the young girls don't understand it. And as you said, one of your previous ones shows that if they see 4 guys, they would think cricket just for men if they don't see any women. So yeah, as I told you, Shakira Salman is doing her part on it, and I'm really proud of that. So yeah, on another note, I think scouting would be pretty ideal, like all around the region. So I know there's cricketers who've been playing for years as well, but still not getting selected. So we need scouts all around the region to say, well, this person look interested, this person look talented, potential, get them in camps. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, Mali.
Yeah, I mean, she hit the nail on the head. She called, Shakira Selman. But I think that's where these players, these experienced players, someone such as Hayley Matthews is so important to the region. I don't think she's used enough as an ambassador around the region. We've got to be pumping her up pretty much as, the cricket superwoman. She's world renowned. She goes all around the world. She dominates. These are the people, and we've got them right here, but we don't use them in the way in which they should be used. Hayley Matthews, as you said, number one at the top of the rankings in all formats of the women's game. She needs to be going around. She needs to be on billboards. We need to see her face. We need to do, have more interviews with her, use her on recruitment drives as well. This is a resource that's come from the Caribbean and shining very brightly on the world stage. And we're just, letting it go by.
Yeah, actually, Hartley Reid in the chat is correcting me. Alfred Campbell, of course, played for Police. I think I was getting mixed up with another Campbell, whose first name we don't remember, who played for YMPC. I'm not going to ask Joel because I don't think Joel goes back that far. So thanks, Harley, for that. And he also made the point. He also revealed to me that Aaliyah Williams is holding back on us a bit. She is holding back a bit because she didn't tell us that she played for a club in Trinidad before being, let's say, discovered by the coaches here in Barbados. Is that true, Aaliyah, or is someone telling lies on you?
No, actually, Alfred invited me, as I said, and then I played on the 19. And the following year, I went to Trinidad and played, and then I ended playing about 2 or 3 seasons. I played for UE, St. Augustine as well. So yeah, he's pretty right on that Trinidad one, but Alfred Campbell invited me first.
Yeah, but how was the experience? What was the difference playing at that level in Trinidad as opposed to what happens here?
I was pretty young, as I said, new in the cricket. So the experience was vital, just going around different cultures, playing on different pitches, different countries and stuff like that. So I think that helped me a lot. So I basically looked forward to playing the next season in Trinidad. And I also was looking forward to playing my following on the 19 year, which I feel like it was a bit better than the year before. I was pretty new. I didn't know much. I couldn't score 1 run. When my team needed it to win to go in the finals. Yeah, it was pretty tough. So I took those games in Trinidad as my learning points, my experience and stuff like that.
One of the things that got me to pay close attention, like Mali, I'm a lover of cricket, but I must admit that it's not like the batting and the ball in the Barbados team that seems to be almost even. I came up obviously paying much more attention to men's cricket, but one of the things that made me pay more attention to women's cricket, I would say, maybe what? I don't want to put a time exactly on it, but let's say within the last 10 years or so. It was at a time when the West Indies men, so many issues, and sometimes you get the impression that you have to wonder sometimes if the guys really enjoy playing the cricket or if it's only about the money, and that kind of atmosphere and that kind of debate that goes on. And I happened to be watching a women's game. I don't even remember who West Indies was playing. And what I noticed about it is that it wasn't a question of the outcome or even the state of the game, but it seemed to me that these girls were enjoying cricket. And it reminded me of the days when it was fun to watch the men. And because of that, I recognized, well, look, these girls are not dominating the world. This was before, obviously, 2016 when West Indies, did so well to win the World Cup. It was before that. They weren't dominating anything at that point, but they seemed to be enjoying what they were doing. And that's what got me hooked to women's cricket, to see the passion that, not only passion, it was just pure enjoyment. And not enjoying in a frivolous way. They were going out there trying to do their best, but they seemed to be enjoying it. And to my mind, too often, I've gotten the impression that the men are not necessarily enjoying the cricket, but it's a job. I don't know if that's a fair comment, but that's just my observation, Joel. Yeah, Joel, I thought you wanted to weigh in.
No, I was just casually listening and taking it all in.
You leaving that one alone outside of your stuff, but I know Mali is a more adventurous batsman. So Mali, will tell me if if I'm totally talking rubbish and he cannot identify
No,
with.
I think you're right. I think you're right. We saw maybe the highlight of that, as you said, during that World Cup when, maybe the boys would have won the under-19s, the women would have won the T20s, and the men won the World T20 as well. And that, man, seems like a long time ago now.
Under Sammy, you've got to admit, well, you don't have to, but under Sammy, you may have noticed that the whole atmosphere was different and that enjoyment was there. So the era I'm talking about was before Sammy. I wouldn't want to suggest what has happened since then because that may be too controversial and that may start a debate that we may have to start on a totally different day.
No, I think we'll probably hit on a bit of that later on in this show in terms of, Sammy being the coach now and, probably what's going to be expected.
Well, yeah, we're going to get to that. But just to wrap up the whole thing about the women, we talked a lot about the Barbados situation. But if we look at it now from not only Barbados and the other countries, because if you look at West Indies cricket is made up of all these other countries. And we know that the regional competition is now finished. There was a lot of criticism about the standard. I tend not to get too caught up in that because it is what it is. I mean, you cannot expect to see the standard of cricket as it exists in Australia, for example, and talking about women's cricket, if the powers that be have not done the work to get it there. So I really don't find all the talk about the standard as being very productive. I tend to see myself as more one for solution. It is what it is. What do we do to get it closer to where we want it? And that's what I'm going to throw out to you guys now, each and every one of you. The question being, what now? What next? You can address that whether you want to address it from a perspective of one country. If you want to address it from the perspective of the collective West Indies, however you want to address it. You've had a regional tournament. You've had Barbados winning, being the double crown champions. We've seen what the girls have to offer. It should have told us what we need to do. What now? And I know that, Joel, you've got some other business to attend to, so maybe we'll go with you first, just in case you have to run out.
In terms of what next, that series versus Ireland. But in terms of the women, in terms of their ability to be competitive at levels that we're talking about, as Aaliyah mentioned, as Mali mentioned, you mentioned, obviously is a case of, who do we place as those people want to gather the interest, but as a starting level in terms of the current talent pool that we have, I think that I mentioned the fact that the right people need to be in place in terms of the jobs on hand. And the case whereby we treat them as actual athletes and not just say, well, they're women, and, just train them as we think women should be trained, but really, put the level of thought that we've seen go into the development of men's cricket and put that same level of thought into development of what are now these women athletes, because that is essentially who they are. And I think that if we can properly do that with the current talent pool that we have, because watching the cricket, it is there. The performances are just simply not consistent. And that is where a lot of the issue is. And funny enough, that is a lot of our cricket on a whole, but we have something that we can actually work with. And it's just a case of utilizing what is in front of us and putting the right people to get the results out of them. Because I said, I've looked across and I don't think that women's cricket is taken as seriously as it needs to be taken as. And when we start to take it seriously, that is when you're going to start to see a shift in terms of the personnel, in terms of the attitudes. And also, if the women believe that they're being treated seriously, you might also begin to see the performances as well, because there are instances where they feel as if, like I said, it is almost second fiddle, the junior coming up behind everything else. In this case of, however you play, and we'll accept that. But we must keep this in place because there needs to be women's cricket to look, like there's diversity and equality and all that kind of stuff that we talk about now. But until we actually put these steps in place to show that there's no first or second in terms of our cricket, then our cricket will not change. But like I said, that interest needs to be there. And from the time that interest is there, and from the time the women feel as if they are on the same level as the men, you might start to see those performances coming out because they feel as if they're being treated now in a way that they should be treated as professional athletes, because that is exactly what they are. And we start to get the right people in place as well, whether or not it is women, whether or not it is men, at all the disciplines that we have, from coaching back down to the backroom staff. When we start to get those types of people in the places that they should be, that is how we will see the difference.
Mali?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joel said it all there, to be honest. I think consistency all around, consistency in terms of the development of the game. We're going to actually have to see these territorial boards make that effort. I'm going to speak about the Leeward Islands in particular, because to be honest, absolutely nothing has gone on for the women's and the girls' game here. We do see a team represented at the tournaments, but to be honest, I'm not even sure how they came up with an 11, to be fair, because there's no cricket, no leagues, nothing. The girls basically have to try and play, get a chance to play with the men. That's the only options available to them here in this region. So we're going to need consistency, as Joel said, not only making it look like you want to develop the game, but people are really going to have to put their feet to the ground, really invest that money that's necessary. As he said, the women are not second class. It's going to have to be the same level of investment as well. As we're seeing, the game is growing, it's in its ascendancy, and it's only going to get bigger.
Okay, well, we certainly want to spend some time on the men's game. And Aaliyah, any closing comments that you want to make regarding what we've talked about, or anything that may not have been mentioned that you may want to share?
Oh yeah, I would just recap the whole thing. I totally agree with you guys, and I really appreciate the fact that there's 3 guys here so interested in women's cricket, know so much about women's cricket. As Joel was saying earlier about the interest in the women, I think that the powers need to be genuinely interested in women's cricket. If we got the guys at the top that really care, then we will see a shift in the performances, the interest, when it comes to the West Indies level, even the regional level. So I think that would be key. But all in all, we really need to develop, we really need to get our girls at a higher level to be competing with the world-class countries like Australia and so on.
Well, Aaliyah, thanks so much for joining the show and sharing your thoughts. Pretty brave of you to do that, because, sometimes as players, you tend to shy away from the public as much as you can, unless you are caught up and you're forced to do an interview. So it's really a pleasure to be able to sit and chat with you, and have you bring your perspective to women's cricket, because it's at a stage that we really all want to see it develop. And I think the girls, the women, are deserving of the best support possible. And that can only happen if the people, the decision makers around, are serious about what they're doing. So thanks very much, Aaliyah. I hope you don't mind. I'm sure we'll be calling on you again at some point in time. So all the best to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night.
Good night to you. And Joel, I know you've got to run as well. Anything you want to add before you go?
Not particularly. Just honestly, just a pleasure as always to pop in and just give my thoughts. I don't see myself as some whiz kid on all that's going on. Like, I still new on the block, but definitely a pleasure to be here and just share the little bit that I've been able to experience.
You want to share a little bit about the recent current events before you run off? The whole issue of the West Indies looking for a new director of cricket. There's the whole issue of the new coach. There's some white ball events coming up. Are you going to just throw something at us and run off? Or are you going to use I won't say excuse, sorry. Are you going to use the fact that you have another pressing engagement to leave all those alone outside the Oscar?
I could share a bit in terms of the new director of cricket. That would be an interesting one, to be honest, given that has a role that obviously shapes the path forward for cricket in the West Indies, and it needs to be somebody who has a vested interest in the development of the region, and not just somebody who's coming to collect a paycheck. So that would be an interesting one in terms of, one, the criteria that is used to select the person, and two, who they actually select for that role. I think Jimmy Adams probably in that role, probably just about maybe 5-6 years now. I think maybe.
Have you seen the productivity from that position that you would have expected?
I don't know, because it's a case of the reason why I say I don't know is because I am not aware of when he came in what was outlined as the objectives,
Right.
to be achieved, and that's why I wouldn't necessarily comment on if I think that there has been progression, because I'm not sure in terms of what his boxes to tick off specifically were. That's the only reason I wouldn't necessarily comment on that, because you have seen a few programs come into play and you have seen moments where you thought cricket was going in the right direction. But overall, obviously, the Caribbean really is not satisfied, obviously, with our current position. But I wouldn't necessarily weigh in terms of him specifically, in terms of necessarily commenting on whether or not, I think that he did what was required of him based on what was told to him when he first came into that role, that kind of stuff. In terms of looking at the coaches, obviously they have a lot of work ahead of them. I had a chance to speak with both of them, actually. So I did an interview with Andre Coley in Antigua. I would have just had a brief chat with Sammy, probably about 40-minute chat the other day on a live.
A brief 40-minute chat.
Yeah, a brief 40-minute chat.
But I'm glad for his sake it wasn't a lengthy chat.
But yeah, and one thing I know is that they both have the best interest of West Indies cricket at heart. I've had a chance to watch Kohli work with the West Indies Academy, and he's really done a good job with those guys. You can see the structure he was able to put in place. He had a brief stint, obviously, before being now the official coach with the actual West Indies team, and the results were mixed for him. But overall, I think that both coaches have their minds and heart in the right place at the moment. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not they can get the results, and not necessarily results instantaneously, because I don't think that is fair on any of them in terms of saying, well, we've got a new coach, we expect to turn around immediately, but incrementally. And that's something that I think Darren Sammy mentioned as well, the incremental changes, and the small boxes that he can tick off as he goes along. One, if we could look at maybe in terms of the players' attitudes to West Indies cricket on a whole, can we get that to change? That might be a box that we can tick off. That would then lead into performances. And, if we could get those performances coming across consistently, another box that we could tick off. And I think that he mentioned that in terms of short-term objective is to move up one place in the rankings by the end of the year. And that is something that I think is achievable from a West Indies perspective if we can get those performances. So, if that can happen, we can say, you know what, this is looking like it could be on the right trajectory. But I don't think it'd be fair just to give them 2 short stints, and then discarded them either. So I do think that they are 2 good persons for the job in terms of what I've been able to interact and gather from them from conversation. But obviously, have the pressure of actually being in the role. You have that crown on your head almost with all the attention on you. Whether or not both of them will be able to handle that and produce the results that they want to see when they were outside of the role, that is another question that I guess would have to be answered. And like I said, not in a 1-year time, but more so towards the period of a 2-year time, because you have the World Cup coming up. Not this one, but the one in 2024 in the Caribbean. That might be a better gauge in terms of, okay, what have we seen? Have we moved up that place? Have a few players either come back into the fold, or have we mended relationships, all that kind of stuff. Even if they don't come back into the fold and play for West Indies cricket, just the mere fact that we have mended relationships will be a good step for West Indies cricket as well, because it means that they'll be willing to help out future generations of the cricket moving forward as well, which is something that we need, because there's a reason why our stars have been able to get to the top. They have that talent, they have what it takes. And you certainly want, even if they don't come back in a coaching capacity, in a mentorship capacity, even if not necessarily at the West Indies level, but at junior levels, that you mend those relationships with those players so that they're willing to pass on that knowledge as well. So that was directed as coaches. Why missing one more?
What are you missing in terms of what?
No, I think you mentioned 3 things for me to chat on quickly. It was
the upcoming white ball matches. You've got the UAE, which is a whole lot of discussion. And then you've got the qualifiers.
All right, so in terms of UAE, naturally I would expect that to be, it are warm-up matches for the World Cup, and I do expect West Indies to put out some good performances in that. Naturally, honestly, as white ball cricketers, we have played better than our red ball format. And looking at UAE and not seeing them as any lesser of an opposition, but just the fact that, is that precursor to the main tournament, I would like to say that, going into that, I think that West Indies currently have what it takes to do well across those matches that they play. The World Cup, for me, I know it will be what we consider to be a dogfight, to be very honest, in terms of the qualifiers, because everybody knows that the qualifiers are some of the most passionate cricket that you will ever see, because it's teams that do not necessarily normally get a chance at a spotlight. Because of that, it adds additional pressure.
I'm going to take on the big one.
Yeah.
You want to take on a big one.
No, honestly, that is exactly it. Ireland had an interview recently, and it was posted on Cricinfo, and they said that they could lose this test match, this one-off test versus England, but if they qualify for both World Cups, that they would see that as a successful year. And there's a cricket match at Lord's versus England, and you want to do well, but for them, there is more money value. There's more TV attention when you get to qualify for the World Cups than this one-off test that they can play, which honestly, they see it as a case whereby, it's just squeeze them in, just to say they play a test match. But for a lot of those nations, the Scotland, the Ireland, the Namibia, these guys, this is their bread and butter, their heart and soul, and this is what their countries are looking out for. So I know that it will be a challenge for the West Indies, even though, based on experience, based on ranking, they should qualify. But I do think that looking at what Darren Sammy has been able to do with teams, and not always necessarily performances, but in terms of how he's been able to get them to gel, because I look at a team like St. Lucia in terms of the CPL, in terms of what he's been able to do in the Pakistan Super League as well, in terms of how he's been able to just get teams to come together and enjoy playing the cricket together. I think that if he's able to do that for the qualifiers, then West Indies should go through and qualify quite comfortably as well, and comfortably just in terms of winning, because it will be, like I said, a dogfight for them in those qualifiers.
Thanks so much, Joel. We know you've got to run, but we look forward to hearing from you and sharing with you, sometime very soon.
Yeah, that was the last alarm that went off there. So yeah, it's been a pleasure, honestly, being here. And yeah, enjoy, guys.
Okay, thanks. Well, look, Mali, I think it's fair to say that your dad was described as hitting across the line. And I think you have similar aggression. I didn't get a chance to see you on the field, but I know that in the commentary box and opportunities like this, you are not afraid to speak. So, first of all, your feelings on the appointment of Darren Sammy, and secondly, while you're at that, your feelings about his strategy of reaching out to the players who many see as having turned their back on West Indies cricket in some instances, and also those who some people feel no longer have what it really takes to strengthen the West Indies side. So your thoughts on those two things to start with?
Well, to be honest, I think Joe would have hit on it towards the end of his take there in terms of the appointment of Darren Sammy. I think the strength, and that's something that we saw while he was captain as well of a Darren Sammy, is he understands the different fabrics and textures of the Caribbean. He understands the uniqueness of West Indies cricket, the different islands and cultures that make up West Indies cricket. And he's got that ability to knit that together. And I think that's going to be a trait that's going to be necessary as well for the director, whoever that may be. That's almost going to be the number one in terms of my list, is that he's going to have to understand that uniqueness of West Indies cricket. And I think Darren Sammy, especially for white ball cricket, at this stage is absolutely, I mean, it remains to be seen, but I think he's perfect for the role. Like I said, what he brings to the game, his man management skills, we saw that with those T20 World Cup winning sides, the joy that it seemed that the team played with. You think of the dances, the celebrations, you look back on it, it's almost like a little golden period of West Indies cricket, especially in the white ball arena. And I think a lot of that is what he'll bring to the white ball to the T20 and 50 over sides. In terms of him reaching out to certain players and, you know, a lot of criticism of that, I think that's slightly just overstated. I think we're seeing a bit of what Sammy brings to the table. Sammy, the politician, Sammy, the diplomat. You know, that's what he brings. That's why he's an honorary citizen of Pakistan as well. You know, it's a strength of the man. You know, he's really just trying to bring some unity and some harmony to West Indies cricket at this stage. He knows that's something that's desperately needed. And in terms of reaching out, yeah, you know, you reach out, you speak, but I think he will also know, and I think he keyed in on this as well when I listened to a little of his press conference, was the fact that, yes, he's reached out, but it still will come down to performances. So these guys are going to have to really signal their commitment and also perform in order to get back. I know some may say maybe Narayan's past it. Andre Russell definitely maybe a little past it. But I think in terms of him reaching out to players of that, like Evan Lewis, we're just seeing the strength of a Darren Sammy, almost statesman-like in the way he goes about his business. And I think that's exactly what's needed at this stage.
Yeah, I personally think it's much ado about nothing.
Yeah.
He's been appointed. That has caused controversy. The good thing about the whole thing is that it keeps the conversation going, which keeps the interest in cricket. That's a good thing about it. But I really don't understand the desire, the strong desire in some quarters to prove that he's a bad choice. I think that will work itself out in time. And I'm prepared to wait.
And
Yeah,
what I have loved about this whole thing is, even as you said, the criticism of the process. You know, we're probably been given more info than we've ever been given in terms of an appointment and the interview process and you know the prerequisites per se. So now we're having criticism of the process, and I think that's almost showing a bit of growth here in terms of administration here in the West Indies. That's for sure.
the part that makes me shake my head is a call for people to the call for the board or whoever has that information to share with the general public, the people who are playing. No, I mean, come on. I don't know how many of us have ever applied for a job anywhere, but if you are working in a particular job, Mali, it will certainly be embarrassing for your name to pop up applying for some other job halfway across the world. I mean, I've known people who've gotten on a plane to go and do a job interview, and they did it because they took 2 days vacation or they sneaked out on the weekend or something. I mean, come on.
And
Are we that naive that we expect somebody's going to do that?
You're right. I remember it was probably Sir Curtly Ambrose who would have applied for that England fast bowling coach position a couple of years ago, and there was a big, thing made of that. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm not so sure I would want that, you know, especially for Curtly Ambrose, you know, that being he wasn't appointed yet. He was only just applying, and then him not getting the job then turns around and almost has a negative effect on him. You know what I mean?
There's so many reasons why that expectation is just plain silly. So I'm not even going to add to that by spending time on it. That's what it is. The part though that I find that I would more prefer to respond to, you talk about the criticism of the process, and the part of the process would be the part about the qualification. That kind of baffles me a little bit. Now, bear in mind that I have no difficulty with qualifications. I mean, that's why I would have spent significant parts of my life studying, you know. So clearly I'm not against qualification. But I've also been in the world of work long enough to know that top qualifications don't necessarily translate to top performance. You know, and I've been in situations where, and this is a fact, I'm not exaggerating, where I wouldn't say the least qualified, but the person who has a lower level of qualification than many around has been significantly, has been one of the most valued and significant people in that workspace. you know, so I don't know if other people haven't seen these things, and if the only measure they know is a piece of paper. I really don't know. What I do know is as well that for the past, what, maybe 10 years, I don't want to put a limit on it, I may be wrong, somebody may tell me I'm wrong, but for the last several years, in acquiring coaches, and we've had many, we have paid attention to those paper qualifications. Are we where we would like to be now, having done that? So you're being critical because a tool was not the major tool to make the selection. But when that tool was a major tool in making the selection, it didn't work for us. So we are complaining about losing something that wasn't effective in the first place.
And I think you've really got to examine these things on a case-by-case basis. I think a lot of people are just a little too broad with these things. And you really look at a Darren Sammy per se, and the fact that he was a captain. Experience counts for a lot, not just that paper. Do you know what I'm saying? He was not just a player, he was a captain, and a successful one at that. And that experience is invaluable. Not only that, he stayed abreast with the modern game, not only through commentary, but through his coaching stints in Pakistan, in the CPL. So he's, obviously stayed well attuned to what's going on in the modern game. We've seen most of the innovation really happening in the white ball format, in T20 cricket, to be particular. So, I don't see much wrong with that Darren Sammy appointment of him running the white ball game. I think he's absolutely perfect. I think who he brings alongside him, that will be interesting to see. His backroom staff, that will be key as well. But that'll be interesting to see who he has.
I'd be prepared to give it a chance, because what I'm saying is you went the other route and didn't get the outcome that you want for whatever reason. That's a discussion for a different day why that was so. You've tweaked it now, and you've put an emphasis on something else. I think you can only judge it when you see it in operation, really. Exactly. So I really don't understand all of the noise. And the whole thing about interviews, interviews and qualification, they are very, very important when you have to make decisions and you don't know who you're dealing with. For example, I left Barbados and I went to 2 different countries at 2 different times to get interviewed for a job. They would have known nothing about me. The people on the interview panel, none of them ever saw me teach a lesson or had any discussion with me about education. The most that they may have been able to do would be to get an opinion of me from somebody else. And even so, that's one opinion of a person who may love me to death or a person who may hate me. So you're sitting in front of a group of people who don't know you. So your paper qualifications are going to be significant. The way you conduct yourself during the interview is going to be significant. Anybody who's been around West Indies cricket knows Darren Sammy. And if Darren Sammy is recognized by the powers that be, that he has certain qualities that they believe will help West Indies cricket at this stage, I really don't understand what the hullabaloo is all about.
Yeah, I don't either, to be honest. But like you said, let's give it a chance.
That's good for us. If he doesn't do well, he would simply join a long list of other coaches who were highly qualified who didn't do well. So I don't see an issue really.
But let me just add something quickly to that, Philip, in terms of, that's at the very top now here in terms of that Darren Sammy appointment. And I think he can definitely, with his skills, definitely get some better results in the white ball game, in the white ball format. But I think that we've got some lingering issues below the surface, in terms of the players that are ascending to the international level and what's actually being done at the territorial level to prepare them for international cricket.
Mali, I can't argue with you at all. Before I put you on the spot and ask you to look into your crystal ball and tell us if West Indies will qualify for the World Cup, I'm going to go back a bit to the women's game, in the sense that I just saw Errol Barrow, who is a coach, coach who focuses a lot, I think it's fair to say, or let me rephrase that, who has a great interest in women's cricket. I shouldn't say he focuses a lot on women's cricket, because he may very well be coaching men as even more so than women, but I know he has a great interest in women's cricket. And he made a comment which would be related to what we were discussing earlier. He said it must be consistent effort across the region. All the regional boards must start at grassroots level with leagues, etc., with clear and defined pathways. And of course, that would have been related to our discussion on youth cricket. I think that comment in itself sums up a lot of what we've said, and it's good to hear that coming from an active coach. So good night to you, Errol. I'm glad that you are tuned in and listening, and we look forward to interacting with you even more. I don't know if you will be able to share your thoughts, Errol, and others who are following on what I'm going to ask. Malino, I'm going to put you on the spot. Will we be seeing West Indies? Let me not be so unfair. Are we likely to be seeing West Indies in the World Cup later this year? In other words, can they finish in the top 2 of the qualifier?
Yeah, I think so. To be honest, Philip, I think back to that series against Ireland here in the Caribbean, and you look back, and it's probably almost that series that has got us losing. That series has got us playing in this qualifying tournament. When I saw the draw and seeing West Indies and Sri Lanka, obviously on two different sides to begin with, 2 different groups, gave me a bit of confidence there as well, to be fair. So I think with the team that we've got, we've got Shea Hope at the helm, someone who is almost at the top of his game in that format, the one real standout we've got in that format. I think with him at the helm, that squad that we've got in those conditions in Zimbabwe, you said likely. I think we are very likely to see the West Indies in the World Cup later on this year.
Okay. Well, I am encouraged by your optimism. It's an interesting, for me, I really wonder to what extent the people of the Caribbean, how they actually feel about that in terms of the West Indies' chances. There's been so much talk about who's coach and who's not coach. And to my mind, it makes for interesting conversation. I only hope that those who are closer to the process are not distracted by that and are focusing on, I would say, more productive things. That is doing what we can to get our players ready for that exercise, whether it be the players who, well, in terms of the qualifiers, the team's already selected. So if you're going to welcome players back into the fold, then obviously that would be at the World Cup itself. And while people may be concerned about that, let me be very specific here. So you're looking at, in terms of an example, you're looking at Narain, whose name was being bandied around, and there are those who believe that even if he were to come back, it wouldn't last because he may not be able to, abide some people believe he still has an issue. But I don't know if a Narain would come back into the fold. If a guy like Sinclair, for example, while a lot of what he has done has been in red ball cricket, but just to call the name of a player who is emerging and doing well with some degree of consistency, and there are others. So what I'm trying to say, maybe in a long-winded way, let me cut it short and get to the point. It is okay, or it is one thing to say to players, we welcome you back into the mix-up. But it's really up to the players who are now in the mix-up to determine, to a large extent, if those other players will get to come back. Because I don't know that the West Indies selectors, this group of West Indies selectors, will discard players who are performing simply because other players who some may believe to be better are available. That's not logical. I haven't seen anything from the Desmond Haynes selection panel that would suggest to me they would be so illogical to discard performing players to bring back, past great, so to speak, or past outstanding players. So to a large extent, whether these players come back or not is determined by the performance of those who are playing. And if they know that there are others outside breathing down their necks and they've got any desire or motivation to hold on to their play, they know, or they should know, what they need to do. They need to perform. And one of the best ways to ensure decent performance, at least, is to prepare.
And we're seeing that, as you said, you mentioned Kevin Sinclair, his performances in Bangladesh, in the best of the best here in the Caribbean, and also the academy. What you just said, when you think of what we've seen from the academy in the past couple of months, in terms of how they've basically just blown away their counterparts, their more experienced counterparts, it should give us something to really get a little, not too much just at this stage, because, you know, we're West Indies cricket fans, but just a little excited about. You take Kirk McKenzie into account as well. Here's a young man who's making it pretty clear that he wants to play international cricket as soon as possible. He's trying to get there as soon as possible.
Percent is Athens has already been the talk of the town in many.
Athens, yes, as well. You know, I use McKenzie for a particular reason though, because he would have been someone who would have been way off the radar, you know, almost a couple months ago, before the best of the best per se. And he's come through with some real consistent performances. That double 100 would have really announced himself on the West Indian stage, at least. And we've seen him kick on now on his first international tour, right? A team, but development. So I'm taking a lot of heart from what I've seen from a young Kirk McKenzie. He's knocking on the door, basically telling these selectors, look at me, I want to play international cricket as soon as possible. And that's what you want to see from the young guys.
When Billy, who is watching us, he made the point that Darren Sammy is also a selector. I suppose he is suggesting that, you know, I said earlier, I don't see the Desmond Haynes selection committee being illogical. I don't see Darren Sammy being illogical either. Darren Sammy likes to win. We have 2 World Cups. Tell us that. Okay. And also, Darren Sammy is well aware of all the talk around. And the Darren Sammy that I observed as a player seemed to be the type of person who felt that whatever you say to him that he cannot do, he finds a way to get it done. That's how I've observed him over the years as a cricketer and a captain. And therefore, he will want this team to do well. I do not see Darren Sammy dropping performing players or suggesting that performing players be dropped simply to bring back a guy who was once a valued member of the team. I don't think he could be that illogical, not if he wants to win.
And just to add to that, I'll just get a little more specific, and just to hit on that point that you said, you know, when Darren Sammy was captain of the team, they almost, you know, there was these grumblings and you heard the murmurs of there being some factions, you know. And when Darren Sammy got that captaincy, he could have then turned around and used that against certain players, but he didn't. He obviously stayed professional. Winning was the number one thing. And like I said, he understands the different fabrics of the Caribbean, the different cultures, how to knit them together. And that's something that he did in his playing career. And that's something I anticipate that he'll do in his coaching career as well.
And I'm going to throw something else in the pot. We are not inside the mind of Darren Sammy. We do not know what type of strategy he may be adopting by throwing that out. Sometimes they give people enough rope to hang themselves.
Exactly.
We do not know that Darren Sammy is really as keen as we seem to think he is to have all those guys back inside the team. We don't know. I think sometimes we see things and we jump and we feel we have to comment without really, and sometimes really all we can do at a certain point is wait and see.
And if you think about it just for 1 second, how would these players be able to show their commitment to West Indies cricket? They'd have to come back and play some local or regional tournaments and show their commitment. It's now on them. He's already made this public statement. It's now on them to see what they do. Exactly. Exactly.
And if Russell can find enough fitness and whatever else to come back in, let's say, the CPL, for example, or the Super 50 competition, and talk and perform most others in the batting and bowling, one or the other or both. And you can clearly see he has outperformed the others who are there. Having played in the competition, what's wrong with selecting?
And I think everyone's keen in on the Ryan and Russell, but the bigger one for me is Shimron Edmai.
Yes.
That's the one. That's the one where I'm really taking a keen interest to see how Darren Sammy manages to resolve that situation. Because I think that's the one that has the potential for the biggest upside. Shimron being still still a young man in his career, still got a bit ahead of him in terms of what he can contribute to West Indies cricket. So I'll be keeping a keen eye on that Sammy Shimron my CWI relationship.
Well, Mali, I was getting to the point where I was going to release you. I haven't put you under some pressure, I suppose. But our viewers are not having any of it. Our bar says, I do believe that West Indies will qualify. The players are good enough individually, and once they can pull together as a team, then the performances will come. Wayne Holder, he says, and you know Wayne Holder quite well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to hear you, Mali. He's putting you on he's not even on the show tonight, and he's putting you under pressure. What a guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. He must have something against you.
Got something up his sleeve, man.
Yeah. Would like to hear Mali expand on the statement underlying issues surrounding the players that we've been sending for to international cricket. Yeah. Would like to hear Mali expand on the earlier statement underlying issues surrounding the players we have been sending for to international cricket. You remember you said that, Mali?
Yeah, I do. I'm talking about the overall development of the cricketers that are ascending to the international game here in the West Indies. I don't think the administration has done enough. I think about the Leeward Islands in particular, Antigua, you break it down, because this is another thing, the uniqueness of West Indies cricket here. I don't think people understand what players from even the Leewards or the Windwards have to go through in order to play representative cricket for their region. It's almost they've got to play first for their clubs, then they've got to play for their islands, play in the Leeward Islands or the Windward Championships, then they make it to the first class level. So it's almost an added step here in this region, and there's just not enough being done. The way talent is identified here in the region leaves a lot to be desired. We're basically losing cricketers every year, something that I think if you're a lover of West Indies cricket, you should be aware, and not only aware, concerned about, because it's something that affects us all. You know what I'm saying? We've got talented players in this region. We're seeing players that, like a Casey Carty, come from an island that's not renowned for cricket here in the Leeward, St. Martin as well. So who knows? He could have been a player that could have just slipped through the cracks. It's that talent that almost has pushed him through. And I think we need more being done from the territorial level, from grassroots all the way through. Antigua doesn't do enough for its cricketers in terms of preparing them for the first class level. And that overall has an effect on West Indies cricket. And if you think about it that way, or if you don't, believe me, just have a look at the results. Look at what we're producing, especially in the batting department. It's been a real dearth of great batsmen across the region, not just from the Leewards. Here in the Leewards, fast bowlers. You think of that long lineage of fast bowling here in the Leewards, not just from Antigua, but in the Leewards per se. And where are the fast bowlers apart from an Alzari Joseph? It's basically it. You've got a young Kelvin Pittman, young Antiguan fast bowler. But there were days when I would turn up to an Antiguan practice and there's 10, 12, maybe 14 fast bowlers in the nets, all bowling 80, 85 plus. Those days are long gone. We need to somehow find a way to get these, to attract more players into the game. But not only that, surround them with the right coaching as well, that prepares them for the international game. I think we're really lacking in that regard.
I see. So Mali, just before we go though, if you can just share with us, I know that since you were last on the show, you were involved in a couple of other projects and you were doing your commentary and so on. So what have you been up to? How those things been
going? Things have been going really well. Commentary, been doing quite a bit of that. I think since I've been on this show, I would have done the CPL, I would have done the Regional Super 50 as well. So obviously just done quite a bit of women's cricket. a bit of the regional 4-day, the Headley Weeks Tri-Series. Just still learning this broadcasting game, you know, and I'm just trying to get better at it. Probably, in the last week or so, we had documentary filmmakers here in Antigua doing some filming for the Ravi Shastri documentary that's supposed to drop just before the World Cup in India as well. So it's been quite a busy period.
You're going to be part of that documentary?
Yeah, well, Dad was actually a part of that. So we were putting together like locations, set locations for the filming to be done and stuff like that. And obviously maybe some more developments as well on that side in terms of the documentaries, you know, maybe highlighting some West Indian cricketers. There's just a few things bubbling on that scene as well. So yeah, quite a lot going on in that cricketing arena.
And how's that doing?
Yeah, that's good, man. Yeah, still trying to get his PGA card. I think time's running out now, though, to be honest. You know, on the golf course every day. That's basically what he does these days. So he's really well, though. Really well.
That's great. That's great. Certainly brought great joy to many people and to the West Indies as a whole.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Then, of course, following that career in the commentary box as well. And you seem to follow him in every pathway. You play some cricket as well. And now you're in the commentary box as well and making a name for yourself out there.
Yeah, well, I know. Thank you very much. I know you were at the start as well, very encouraging as well. A lot of members in your forum as well are very encouraging as well. And yeah, I'm enjoying it. Doesn't feel like work, and that's a good thing. You know, I'm at times getting paid to basically just talk about the game that I love and I grew up watching and playing. So it's great overall, man.
Okay, well, I would take this opportunity to thank our viewers, especially those who took the time to share some thoughts with us in the chat. Hartley win, both wins. We had 2 wins. Earl Barrow. And well, I did mention that if there was any difficulty in getting through to us on the chat, that there was also the possibility for WhatsApp. But what we've done here, Mali, having started by talking about the women's game, having moved towards the situation of the men's game, the upcoming qualifiers and the World Cup after that, what is needed for West Indies men's cricket. I think that's just but the beginning. Given the the schedule, let's say, as we look forward to the amount of cricket which we're going to have, you know, coming up. Lots more to talk about. Of course, there'll be the CPL at some point in time. So I really do appreciate the fact that you took time out to share with us, and I look forward to future interaction with you on the topic of West Indies cricket and anything else that you may want to throw in there for interest, because we know that we know you're an all-rounder.
Yeah, man, and let me say it was a pleasure actually being on the show tonight alongside Joel, yourself, and Aaliyah. Very disappointed not to have Mr. Hartley Reid on the program. I always enjoy his debates, so maybe next time, make sure when I'm on, you get Mr. Hartley Reid on as well.
I'll promise you that.
Yeah, right.
Hartley is a guy who a straight talker, and no one appreciate it.
I respect it so much. I respect his straight talking.
You don't have to wonder what he's thinking.
Yeah.
You know, straight talker, that offends many people. But to my mind, that whether you're offended or not depends on your level of maturity. Because you can only hear and accept what sounds good.
Yeah.
Then I don't know what good that is.
No, having him on your show makes for fantastic debate. So
it makes for fantastic.
Not having him on.
And the thing about it is that you know, there are people who get offended because he's saying things that they don't like to hear. But the thing about it is that although he debates in a very intense way, he doesn't get put off by the people who say negative things that say about him. You know, and that's interesting. You know, because there's some people who can give, but they can't take. But, you know, and I think I really appreciate people like yourself, people like Hartley, who will say what they genuinely believe. Not necessarily respectful, but sometimes people hear things and they can't take it. When really in truth, there's nothing wrong with listening and reflecting, and then maybe you'll see what comes from that. So yeah, I'll grant you that. We'll have you and Hartley on at the same time. I don't know if our viewers can handle it, but we'll put them to the test. So thanks again. Thanks to Joel, who was here earlier, and to Leah. And thanks most of all to those of you who tuned in to watch and listen to the show. I will invite you to join us again very soon for another episode of Anything Cricket. Let's talk.